speaker. Um, yeah, it literally helps you track down physical assets and their location. And when I say physical assets, I mean human assets, and there were several located here in New York City.
So I just found an article, the headline is 2 days ago, Pfizer, Novartis, Eli Lilly among pharmas hitting the red carpet with Academy Awards TV ads. So I
Say
put
that
it on top. Is this the one?
Pfizer.
Pfizer, Novartis, and Eli Lilly among the pharmas hitting the red carpet with Academy Award TV ads.
Okay. Okay. So
So they are
they ran an ad. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Leading sponsors then.
Okay. And then let's Google the words Pfizer alopecia. Does anything come up in the?
Yes.
Yeah. What comes up?
Something came up too. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I sent you the announcement from Pfizer itself.
Okay. It says new trial data show hair growth in more alopecia patients from 3 days ago. And is that new trial data from Pfizer? Hold on. Nearly 40% of adults with alopecia are taking baricitinib, an oral inhibitor, to see significant hair regrowth in 52 weeks, according to. Let me search this article for the word Pfizer. Nothing. Okay, so we can skip that. Pfizer announces positive. Oh, 1 day. Oh, wow. 1 day ago, Pfizer announced positive top-line results of a. Is that a alopecia? Is that in here? Uh-oh.
It's a drug called Ariada or something. That's their drug for that.
Also, look up the side effects of this.
I'm looking up etrasimod, an oral once a day selective receptor.
No, that's the wrong article. My apologies.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
It's investigated. Hold on. This looks legitimate. It's the one at the top of the room is the wrong one. This one says it's investigated for a range of immunoinflammatory diseases, including alopecia. And this one is dated March 23rd. Pfizer announces positive top-line results for phase 3 trial of etrasimod in. Oh yeah, that is right. So if you, it's pinned at the top of the room, and if you search in that article for the word alopecia, you'll see that this drug, this oral once a day drug, is investigated for a range of immunoinflammatory diseases, including alopecia.
We need the X-Files music.
But they have a more specific drug, Tyler. So I just DM'd you on that. So that's one drug they have that deals with a number of autoimmune, but they have more targeted drugs for alopecia too.
It's exactly yesterday that they announced this on their official website press release.
What the fuck's going on? They're fucking with us. They're fucking with us. This whole thing was a Pfizer ad.
Yes.
You were just talking about scripting yesterday, Tyler, about how many people are involved in scripting. So
no wonder Chris Rock is not suing.
Let it sink in. We just cracked the case. This is wild. This is
well done.
Oh my goodness, that is wild. Who was that DM'd me that one? Jason. Oh my goodness, that's great. If there's any truth to this, then kudos. The marketing award of the year goes to Pfizer for this one. That
very very clever marketing indeed.
That would be all time.
And like, if for patients and other folks, I don't even know if they would be angry about that, because that did get the word out quite effectively.
Holy cow! This is a weird coincidence. That's a really weird coincidence. Okay,
it's just a coincidence.
So there is,
I know, nothing to see here.
Hold on, I need John or Dr. Donish to come in and give us the medical context for how coincidental this really is, because maybe it's not. Maybe it seems coincidental to us because we're not in the medical space, and this seems like a 1 in a 10,000 kind of coincidence. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is, to them, this is like, oh yeah, well of course, Pfizer's going to have something that they're working on with related to alopecia, like so.
Yeah, John is on stage.
Okay,
John,
John,
are you there?
where is he on? There he is. Hey, John. So is it to you seem like an abnormal coincidence that Pfizer was a paid advertiser slash sponsor of the Oscars, and they also, in recent days, in the past week, are now announcing results of a phase 3 trial of a drug called etrasimod, which targets alopecia?
Yeah, it's not really a medical question. That's a marketing question, and
Right.
and so I prefer not to weigh in on it. But the timing is weird.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah. Wow.
Tyler, I have got a wider thing with anything like this, though, if that's right. It's almost philosophy that
Yes.
when there's A and B occurring in
Yes.
an environment C,
Yes.
so Will Smith twats Chris Rock in the environment of the Oscars, backed by a drug company, for example, then causality is one possibility, A leading to B, but there are actually 17 possible pathways that you've got to eliminate. You actually can prove causality if you can eliminate all other 16, but some of them are absurd, right? They don't work. They're backwards. Like, well, this is a particular example I haven't really thought through. But if you said that, there's an island, like you live on an island, and there are tall men on this island, and the tall men all have cats. Why? Is it because tall men go to that island and then buy cats? Is it because if you're tall on that island, you choose to buy a cat? Is it because if you've got a cat, you go to the island? Is it because if having a cat makes you tall? Is it because being tall makes you have a cat? Some of these are absurd, but there are 17 logical pathways. And it's quite interesting because you can actually prove causality if you can formally eliminate all other 16. So
Right.
that's just a way of looking at it. But it does also show that there are 16 other possible ways this could happen, except for it being an ad. And it's worth just thinking through what they are. There's a really good YouTube video on that. I'll tweet that out, or I'll send it to you, so that it's very digestible, easy to watch YouTube video that shows the kind of examples. So
Okay.
just a wider.
Yeah, and Ken just DM'd a link that I just pinned to the top of the room of the other drug that Pfizer just announced yesterday, 24 hours ago.
No,
Pfizer.
that was no, it's 2021
Oh,
article.
a year
That's from
ago. Oh,
2021.
interesting. Oh,
So,
sorry.
Yeah,
so, so,
yeah.
I'm, so I'm saying it doesn't play into the conspiracy theory, but
Sorry.
they've got a specific drug for this. Yeah.
But okay, I see. The title on this article says updated March 29th, 2022. So why was the article updated yesterday, and what did they update about it?
Well,
Just
as
curious.
they go through the process, they may have another part of a trial or something. But the original, I don't know. The original article is from August 2021. I mean, I would tell you the fact that both it was Pfizer, apparently Cheryl's saying Moderna, as well as Novartis. If you had a bunch of drug companies advertising at the Academy Awards, that was probably because they were all involved with COVID trials, and they just decided to put some money back, and it wasn't. I mean, I don't think there was a correlation to Jada Smith. That's my own belief, but
That could have been engineered, though. It could have been like, hey, let's put these people together. And just as was stated, there's a team of writers, and Hollywood it doesn't usually run away from controversy. They, in fact, lean in. So I think this is not beyond the realm of something that's orchestrated, although the players themselves may be pawns unwittingly.
So
Guys, who
I,
had anybody heard of alopecia before a few days ago? Only somebody who's interested in it or somebody with medical credentials.
That's not true. That's not true. I've known about it for a long time. It's a common ailment among
Yeah.
should say middle aged to elderly
Elderly.
African
In,
American women.
in Asia, it's quite well known as well. I maybe I'm biased, being bald myself, but I've noticed plenty of people who had uh, kind of circular blotches of hair missing. And maybe I'm just one of those weird people who want to know why things happen. So I, will ask somebody, why are you missing, a bit of hair? And, they say, I have alopecia. I mean, I have memories of that going back to my youth. So for whatever reason, that memory stuck with me. So I feel like I've been familiar with it for a very long time. And like Erwin said, it's also genetically more common in Asia, if I recall correctly. And maybe that's why it's not as. Anyway,
But
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
but
think
this is my
Tyler.
point, that
Tyler.
this is
Tyler.
alopecia's moment, and
Just
if you
just
are
to just to be just to be sure, and it's high between blacks and Asians, where Caucasians are like third on the list or further down, but it is something that those two races have been dealing with for a long time, and I can guarantee you that women that my age that have it are very sensitive about it, very sensitive.
yeah,
Norm.
I would say that
So,
there's
should they
no
put a
lack of
side
empathy.
effect makes you want to slap somebody in the face?
Well,
Should they put a
th-
side effect makes you want to slap
this
somebody in
is
the
my
face?
point. The drug companies are the world's experts at marketing, and it's entirely consistent that that they be working on something that helps you improve your beauty or the way you look, because that's one of the most lucrative things to market is beauty related. The way you look related stuff has to do with your face, so it completely makes sense that they'd be working on something, because people are very sensitive about the way they look,
Right,
about the way
right,
we look. And
right.
so, for a marketing department to take 2 days to say, you know what, this is the time to get this out there, light bulb goes off. That's completely consistent, especially with U.S. pharmaceutical marketing ethos. That's my
Right.
only point.
So hold
So
on,
it's not that big.
Here's what would have. I thank you, Norm. This is really interesting. Here, let's just walk through what would have needed to have happened chronologically. Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia, right? Is that a provable fact? Do we know that as a fact? There's no way she's lying about that, right?
Yeah, she
I don't
herself.
I don't
know,
know.
but
She herself
no
even.
reason to doubt her.
I
Yeah,
know, but my point
she
is,
ever said it on her Instagram.
okay, I know she says it on her Instagram, but again, there's one of two things.
Documentary as well.
There's one of two things happening here. Maybe she's a paid player in this genius marketing. Norm, I like your point that the drug companies are perhaps the most savvy marketers of all, and Hollywood is. I love how it was for Eric phrased it perfectly. They don't run away from controversy; they lean in. You take those two combinations, and if Jada Pinkett Smith either, let's go with example A. Example A, she actually does have alopecia. The drug companies are thinking, well, wouldn't that be great if there was a celebrity that already has it that we could then somehow attach this to? Wouldn't that be lovely? Oh, Jada Pinkett Smith has it. Oh, that's great. Oh, by the way, her husband's nominated for Best Actor at the Academy Awards, so she's going to be at the Academy Awards. Oh well, wouldn't
Let's
that be
let them sit at the front.
wouldn't that be amazing if they were sitting in the front row and one of their somebody who they know very well, Chris Rock is going to be, well, let's talk to Chris and see if he's in on this, and let's see if we can make some movie magic happen. That's
That's how it
example A,
works.
right? I know that can sound. It's almost like the ping pong pizza parlor, whatever. I understand it.
Tyler, Tyler,
Hold on.
before you go to
Yeah, go ahead.
example B,
Yeah,
wouldn't that have to play out as you said yesterday? That they would have to have gotten into the writers' room to plant this joke there for this to happen. That seems like a lot of planning.
I don't
How
know. I
many
think
writers would
That
they have
happens
to
all the
plan?
time.
Easily done. Easily two
Oh,
emails and it's done. Very easy.
yeah, that could be it. But Will Smith, who is like really the darling of Hollywood and has huge following and huge reputation to protect, would do such a thing and damage his reputation. I mean, all the talk has been really how, you know, how
Okay, Messy.
violent it
Right, right,
is
right,
not acceptable.
right. Now, Messy. Now, Messy. Hang on. But he received a standing ovation at the winning of the award. So the
After slapping.
is it after the slap,
Which was totally weird.
which is quite weird, unless a whole lot of people in the
Or
audience
finalist.
were in on this and were or not in on it, but were told maybe there's some applause sign that says, applause. As anyone who's ever been to anything in Hollywood, and I have hundreds of times, there's usually a big applause sign to, tell the trained monkeys when to start clapping. And that led to a whole bunch of people were cued to stand up, or I'm just trying to address this issue of
No, but they did it with voraciousness,
I
Tyler.
think,
Everybody
okay.
yeah,
hates
I think
Chris.
they were being gracious because they think Will Smith, like I said, has been really popular for decades now and made really blockbusters left and right, but he never won anything. So he has been nominated many times, but never won it. So I think they were being gracious and appreciating that he finally got it. And I think that's just me, but anything is possible. But I really don't think so. Lipati, what is her name? The Kenyan actress, Nyango, Lipati Nyango.
Lupita. Lupita
Lapita
Nyong'o.
Nyong'o. Yeah, her face is all over plastered today. I was like looking just quickly articles this morning, and they were saying that priceless reaction to what Will Smith was when he walked over, even when he was yelling twice after even he sat down, that he went to him because Chris was saying, try to make it a joke and say, oh, he slapped the shit out of me or something like that, and then he was still going on and on because he was still angry. And you should see her face. I mean, it was a lot of newspapers, and then even what's her name, Nicole Kidman, today. Again, newspaper, they said that was another priceless reaction because, like, I mean, her face and eyes and mouth. And I really am not convinced, but this is my personal opinion. I'm
And
not
one
convinced
more,
I think
that
one
that
I
more,
don't think.
yeah, one
Remember
more
their
positive.
remember their actors.
One more positive effect, I must say. From yesterday onwards, everyone across America know what is alopecia because it's on CNN, on New York Times, etc., etc., all the mainstream media. So no American have no excuse not knowing this term anymore.
Hey, and a little bit of humor, Tyler. Probably one of the reasons why everybody got up and clapped, and granted, I have never been a fan of Will Smith, but anyway, is that everybody hates Chris. Just joking. If you guys know his TV show.
you know,
Well, I thought it was.
I love a good conspiracy theory. I personally believe, with all the empathy for people that have the condition, and yeah, I was aware of it, like most of the people on this call. I think it's a big red herring. I think at the end of the day, and I'm embarrassed to say that this has sort of caught my attention for an hour trying to study all aspects of it. I truly think this is the situation of a cheating heart that was triggered. Um, and I think Will was triggered because he was fine until he wasn't. Then he snapped. And I think if you draw a correlation between what I said before, and that is Demi Moore was, married to, Bruce Willis and G.I. Jane 1, that was a time when I guess they had an open marriage. She was out cheating. He maintained composure. I think in this particular situation, Will just snapped. I would love to think marketing geniuses
Hey,
would
hey,
look at
Matt,
this.
real
Yeah.
quick. Open marriages, if it's open, it's not cheating.
Exactly.
Well, okay, but I think great point, and this is the sadness and apology that I've spent some time on this. I don't think it was opened by Chris, or excuse me, by Will. I think it was opened by Jada with a 22-year-old. Which, by the way, yesterday I was going to say that the ultimate thing, the only thing that was missing on the Oscar stage is Ashton Kutcher popping out of the velvet curtains and saying, "You're punked." That's the parallel. Anyway, I think it's a cheating heart. I don't think it has anything to do with alopecia. Do I think that affected her happiness? Yes. Could that have
All
been the
I know
trigger?
is
But
if you look online, the comedy out there about their open marriage and everything is on steroids. You guys got to see some of the comedy out there. It is just sickening hilarity.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
think an
mean,
open
who
marriage
is
is one person cheats and the other person just decides to stick it out and stick together. I think that's how they get out of it and save face without having to file divorce for the many kids that they have. Anyway, just my 2 cents.
I
she
agree
Yeah,
with
was
you.
she has
I'm not
been she
sure.
has been she
I'm
has
not sure
been
that
open.
that's. Go ahead, Missy.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I'm not sure that any of this could be deduced as a trigger, um, particularly since I think the Smiths have been extremely transparent about their lives. They talk about it quite often on the Red Table. When you take that decision to open your life up to the public, there's a level of understanding and awareness that you have around how probing the public will be in your life. So they were prepared for that. And the open relationship was both equal, right? Will and Jada went on vacation with Will's other mistress before. So this is something that has gone on for quite some time. I think that when come to the slap that occurred in the Oscars, I'm extremely upset about it because no matter what your personal proclivities are, you laughed at the joke. You're a comedian. You understand the environment of comedy, and this is your friend on stage. This is not a random stranger that you smacked. This is your friend on stage. So if you are going to make a powerful statement, one, do not do it on the night that you're going to cinch the most acclimating award for someone whom you admire. Don't eclipse that. And two, have a conversation with your friends as opposed to doing it on public platform. It was just, I'm torn by the entire thing. And I'm torn only because I do respect Will's body of work.
I
Tyler,
think the
Tyler,
whole
Tyler,
Yeah,
Tyler, are you there?
yeah,
You want to move on?
yeah.
Because if not, we will go back to yesterday's discussion again, which
Okay,
is boring.
okay. Eric, you were going to make your
Could I
final
have a
comment.
finishing, just a final thing
Hold on,
regarding
Eric.
this one?
Eric's got 10 seconds, and Johan 10 seconds. Go.
Yeah, I was going to say that I thought the whole thing was actually a great performance. From the slap to the acceptance speech, really does show a quality of acting I haven't seen in a while. So that to me was kind of a meta moment.
Okay, Johan.
They should give him a second Oscar for that.
Johan.
Can I
Exactly.
Hold on,
This
can
Johan.
I
has
go?
Hold on,
this has
Johan.
become
10 seconds. Go.
this has become a thing in Swedish schools. The teenagers are slapping each other and call it the Will Smith, and they are doing it
Oh,
like
That's
you
scary.
have seen. If you've seen it, there are competitions where they actually have slapping competitions. This is not that hostile, but it is. I had a call from a teacher today, so yeah.
It's a new.
Congratulations, Will Smith. You have
But
created
it
something.
started on TikTok.
so
Yeah.
instead of thanks
Not
Obama, it's
on
thanks Will
TikTok this
Smith.
time.
Well, by the
No, the
way,
slap thing happened before.
it would not be a surprise if to see some notable, like there's going to be a whole lot of slapping happening in the next few days. The question is,
Absolutely.
will any of them amount to anything uh, that would reach into the mainstream media again? There'll be.
Well, Tyler, we were joking about TikTok, what, over the last year or so? I mean, this just heightens it up even more so. Watch the next set of challenges.
So it's TikTok's
Um,
fault.
Oh, no, no, no! Hang on,
um,
hang on, hang on, hang on! Because that makes sense. Because TikTokers are desperate for attention. I mean, you can say a lot of things about TikTokers. One thing that's true more than all other thoughts about TikTok is that TikTokers are thirsty for attention. Right? That is the number one rule of TikTok. So these attention craving TikTokers are likely to do actions that will get them views, right? To oversimplify it. And right now, the number one thing you could do, the number one piece of content you could make that people will want to search for is slap memes of some sort or a slap challenge of some kind. So
Exactly.
it's totally conceivable that we will see an organic evolution of a slapping meme develop in the next day or two. And heaven forbid it turns into slapping teachers again. We already had that challenge, but that's where things could get out of control. And let's hope the sinister geniuses at TikTok are not one step ahead of us here. So
Oh,
let's get into what,
oh, by
Cheryl?
the way, Tyler, David DM me something and saying that it is staged because the pharma companies have experience, have histories doing that before.
Wait, what?
I pin it on top. There's an
Okay.
article that says that pharma companies did have history using the Academy Awards to
Oh shit!
market things.
Oh shit! Here we go. Celebrity spokespeople have been used by retail marketers for ages, but they also could be helpful. What the hell is this roadblock? That is the most annoying ad I've ever seen. There we go. Wow, that's an annoying ad.
Well, Tyler, if this was staged and it turns out to be a TikTok craze and somebody gets hurt, talk about the legal ramifications not only for the Oscars but for the pickets and the pharma companies.
But this article highlights healthcare marketers employing celebrities. Here are 5 recently launched healthcare marketing campaigns that featured celebrities. But I don't think any of they list 6 actually. I don't think any of the 6 are reference the Academy Awards specifically. That would have been a little too much. But anyway, yeah, of course, celebrities get involved in pharma ads. Okay, do we now go into? Did we exhaust Ukraine or not for today? Anyone with the Ukraine article? Anybody with the Ukraine article? I read one interesting one. One of the think tankers. So, Putin is now trying to position it as that he's willingly backing off of Kyiv, uh, leading into the next round of peace talks as a sign of goodwill. And experts on the ground are saying, no, 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 you're not doing that magnanimously. You just got your ass beat and you have no choice. And your army is resigning as they've not been able to encircle Kyiv. And they now understand that's not going to happen. So they're retreating. You are retreating. You are not magnanimously backing off going into this peace talks. You got your ass beat, and that's why you're now trying to reframe that as that you're doing this out of some goodwill out of your heart. Like, yeah, fucking right. So that's the most interesting thing that I saw in the past 24 hours. Anyone else encounter anything noteworthy?
Yeah. I think from what you said, what I saw with BBC and CNN articles that they were talking about what you just said, but at the same time, they said it really doesn't make sense because even though they are saying officially that they want to scale down, not really, what is it, ceasefire, but we're scaling down, but then we'll continue in the south or something like that. But they are saying on the ground they are still shelling. Actually, they are restarting somehow because it was stalled for a couple of days. But now they say that they are even doing some shelling in Lviv as well. So they said it doesn't really matter what he says if what they are doing on the ground does not seem to be in line with what they say, so they don't really think that's going anywhere.
Well, there's two things. Number one, you can stop an encirclement and penetration and still continue to shell because you're still trying to send a message of some sort. You're just opting not to send in troops. But on another thing, to give you guys an example of magnitude, this is Robert. If you look at World War II, the U.S. that had about 16 million soldiers in World War II fight in different ways. We lost under a dozen generals from 1941 to 45, a dozen generals. The Russians, if the facts are true, have already lost 7 generals in a month. And the under a dozen generals that we lost in the U.S. in World War II, majority of them were not due to combat. So the Russians have already lost 7, if the facts are true, to combat in a month. They have operational issues, command control, you name it, logistics. But also, on another note, that I've challenged or chatted with some people on my side, which is all the white papers, research, and studies that we've done over the last 30 years that said the Russians were a huge performance threat. We need to reevaluate how we were looking at things, because yes, you can start an issue, but we listed them as someone who could go in, dominate, take, and grab at will, and that's not being shown here. And we spent trillions of dollars for decades on that assumption.
Another fine point attached to yours is that the Russian military, I've read by reputable sources, is unique in that when a general, it's very hierarchical. In that, if somebody at the top dies, the people at the bottom often are just following orders, and if there's no one to give the orders, then the progress doesn't quite, things slow down. In the U.S. Army structure, if somebody at the top dies, it the people at the bottom are empowered to make their own decisions to move forward. And the person that I read this from has been involved in multiple militaries and seen how the unique and commonalities of multiple militaries, and pointed out that this is America's is very unique in its ability to defer autonomy onto lower ranking members to make decisions.
Well, it shows you how important the non-commissioned officers are, the different levels are, everybody knowing their role and function versus the top down, like you're saying. Exactly, Tyler.
Tyler,
Also,
just
you
to come in, there was a big discussion about this today in another room about the non-commissioned officers and the fact that Russia does not have that infrastructure in place, and where the U.S. is one of the leaders of that structure, and how it has been, how it does help if some high-ranking officer is removed from the playing field, that the non-commissioned officers still have the capacity to keep things, hold things together, and move them forward.
if you've
Another,
ever watched Band of Brothers, it's kind of like that, where everybody kind of interprets the orders rather than sticking to them like the by the letter, as it were.
so there was
Well,
another.
a couple of weeks ago, I shared with you all too that, I mean, Russia couldn't have been prepared for, or I don't know, let me leave it alone. But they moved their conscripts from 24 months to 12 months. How do you lower your conscript requirement by a year prior, a couple years prior to doing a major invasion?
Yeah, that's another point. America has one of the longest training programs for its soldiers compared to other countries. It spends more money and more time training people, so that training does quite literally pay off.
Another major, well, to me, it really interesting article was that there was a military base or outpost. I know those are two different things. I think it's technically an outpost uh, on the Russian side of the border was bombed, and this is Russia very irate, ironically, karmically, that they're they're very upset that they're being targeted now on their side of the border, not on the Ukraine side of the border. Um, you can imagine how the rest of the world is feeling about that. But that was one interesting.
You reap what you sow, Tyler. You reap
Yeah,
what you sow.
I, you have to love the clutching of pearls on that one. So the next one that I have on the Ukraine issue is from the BBC 1 hour ago, that Putin demands that the city of Mariupol surrender to end the shelling. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the shelling of the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol will only end when Ukrainian troops surrender. Mr. Putin made the comment during an hour-long phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday night, so 24 hours ago, the Kremlin said in a statement. But French officials said the Russian leader had agreed to consider plans to evacuate civilians from the city. It comes as new satellite photos showed the destruction caused by the shelling. The images released by Earth observation company Maxar showed that residential areas have been reduced to rubble and highlighted Russian artillery cannons in firing positions on the outskirts of the city. And indeed, I'm going to pin this to the top of the room so you can see the just heartbreaking degree of shelling that has happened. And this is just unbelievable. You have to see the before and after from the satellite photos. I mean, they turned what was a very nice tree-filled town into dust.
Yeah, Dresden after the war.
Yeah,
This looked like Dresden.
yeah. They turned it into dust. That's unbelievable. It looks like a nuclear bomb went off. That's really heartbreaking. And more to the point, um, is when you look at the location of Mariupol on a map, you'll understand, or if you have more than two brain cells, you'll understand why there's so much attention paid from Russia to this one particular location. Yeah, it's key to the operation of things, and especially the whole Crimea episode makes way more sense. So, but importantly, Zelensky, also in the past 24 or 48 hours, has said that giving up territory will not be considered under any kind of peace agreement from the Ukrainian side. So they're not interested in. There's no point in getting together to talk about anything if what you're interested in proposing has anything to do with us giving up any territory. So we can stop
It
the.
might have something to do with Hunter Biden helping secure funding for biotech research. So I think one of the contentions that Putin has is military weapons programs, next door. I personally don't think you have any right to tell what somebody does in their home, but of course we have regulations. It would be nice to see international regulations for biotech research in general, and that might be one of the outcomes from this, because that will definitely come to light.
Hmm. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, so the another Ukraine-related article. Two outlets reporting this in recent hours, like in the past few hours. Al Jazeera and The Guardian. Boy, those are two very, very different publications. Both reporting the same headline, nearly identical. Why is Abramovich playing peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine? Why is Abramovich trying to broker peace? Nearly identical headlines. That in itself is very interesting. Why two, rather major publications, Al Jazeera and The Guardian, those are very major publications, both asking the same question: why is this Russian oligarch inserting himself in the middle of the peace agreement here? I'm curious if they came to the same conclusion. If so, then it's possible that they were being fed this by his PR team. It says the Russian billionaire's role at negotiations surprised some, but others say he's a skilled middleman. Okay, now it's almost certain that this is from his PR team. Roman Abramovich is one of the most eccentric post-Soviet oligarchs. The 55-year-old billionaire. Abramovich decided to sell the club on Tuesday. He is taking part in the peace talks. On his role as a broker, an exiled Russian opposition leader says that he has a fantastic flair for seeing the future. He has a very special ability to predict the future. Okay, well, that doesn't really answer the question. What does The Guardian say? The Guardian says a A source confirmed to The Guardian that Abramovich had fallen ill after the meeting. Well, they're talking about the poisoning that just happened. And he lost his sight for several hours. Oh, shit, that's going to be scary. He soon recovered and was able to take part in later rounds of negotiations, obviously with his own source of water. News of the alleged poisoning has been met with widespread skepticism. In a rare case of Washington and Moscow agreeing on something during the past month, both capitals have given signals they do not believe the poisoning story. That's interesting. On Tuesday, a Russian Vladimir Putin spokesperson added his own denial. Okay, great. Where does the Guardian answer the question they're asking? A source.
Tyler,
Yes,
we saw him yesterday in Turkey at the
right,
meeting, so
right. I get
it
that.
looked normal.
The question is, why is he there? Why is a Russian oligarch filling one of those seats? A source
Tyler.
from the Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul told a news outlet that Abramovich had positioned himself as a neutral intermediary, and his main role was to pass on our position to their boss in human language. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I kind of like that. That's kind of brilliant, by the way. Which is, if I'm Ukraine and I have a position that I want to communicate to Russia, instinctively, the receiver of that message is going to receive it with a posture of defense. They're going to have a natural defense posture to any message that I have because we're at war. So if you're Ukraine, a very clever thing you could do would be find somebody who's friendly to the person you're delivering the message to and say, hey, look, you want this to be over with, right? Okay, you do. Okay, great. Do me a favor. Can you rephrase my message in a way that only you know the person who's going to be receiving the intended recipient of my message? Can you speak it in a language that will make it more receptive to them while still staying true to my message and my narrative, but phrase it with particular language that you know will make it more receptive? That to me is freaking genius. And by the way, we've all experienced this in some form or another, especially at the end of romantic relationships where friends get involved to carry messages, between parties. So that's kind of brilliant. But anyway, I think that's the role that he's filling in there. Well, that's what the Ukrainians are saying. Anyways, Pat, you wanted to jump in? Somebody
No, I
unmute.
think it was me, Tyler. I was
Go ahead.
just going to say, if we know anything about his background, um, he had once upon a time been looking for a position as a politician in Russia, and he sidelined that to go back into business. So I see this as him being a little looking out into the future, and he could be positioning himself, and that may be one of the reasons he may had a slight incident with some undisclosed drug or not, and losing his sight. That he could position himself to be in a position to step into some type of leadership once Putin is dismissed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was thinking the exact same, whether win or lose on both sides, you're kind of in the middle. So it's like, oh, if Putin goes down, I get to be on that side. If he somehow happens to win, I can still be in a decent position.
Preemptively tends to try to assassinate anyone who's about to succeed him. So that does seem to be a weird coincidence as well. So
All right. Let's get into. I think we've exhausted Ukraine for today. So now we get into the. Oh, wrong one. There we got the air. Here we go. Here's the top tech stories for Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. The first is that something called the Ronin Network, which supports Sky Mavis's Axie Infinity game, says it was hacked and that 173,000 Ethereum and 25 million US dollar coins were stolen worth $600 million. Ouch. Ouch, 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 ouch. It may be the largest exploit in decentralized finance history. The latest crypto hack may be the largest yet. 600 million worth. Wow. Sky Mavis COO Alexander Larson says the company is committed to reimbursing Axie Infinity players and is working on a solution. I sure hope so.
Stay away from the shitcoins, people.
The company behind the popular Axie Infinity crypto game said it will reimburse online participants who lost funds after hackers stole 173,000 Ethereum and $25 million of US stablecoin, USDC. Wild. Wild. The company, yeah. Quote, we are fully committed to reimbursing our players as soon as possible. We're still working on a solution. Hackers exploited a security weakness in a so-called bridge software that lets people convert tokens into ones that can be used on another network. We've seen that before, have we not, Ben? I recall there was another substantial hack
Yep.
that the last major one that I'm familiar with was a very similar situation where it was in one of these kind of bridge exchanges. Hackers.
Yeah, a lot of people solving problems that don't need solving in order to try and be a top of a pyramid scheme that they've created themselves, rather than use somebody else's pyramid scheme.
The breach happened on March 23rd, but was only discovered Tuesday. The funds swiped include the deposits of players and speculators and the Axie Infinity treasury revenue. Of the Ether stolen, 56,000 belonged to Axie Infinity. The company doesn't suspect insider involvement in the heist, according to Larson. Axie Infinity is amongst the biggest. The attack is the largest to show that bridges are often rife with problems. Yep, that seems to be the case. Okay, so the next big story, the second biggest story, is that Meta, formerly known as Facebook, paid Republican consulting firm called Targeted Victory to orchestrate a campaign against TikTok in the U.S. Ah! Ha ha! Ah! Did we not suggest such a thing? That when Facebook was getting raked over the coals, as we say, by Frances Haugen and the Wall Street Journal during the Facebook Files drama, did we not suggest that Facebook is likely scratching its head thinking, WTF, bro? Do you not realize that everything you're accusing us of, that TikTok is 10 times worse at everything that you are suggesting in terms of how that's harmful impacts on kids and everything? How about you have a little looky look at what's going on over there at TikTok? And sure enough, shortly thereafter, that did start happening, did it not? And we noticed that it was happening. Wow, what do you know? All of a sudden, the media, the politicians were completely unfocused on TikTok. And then shortly after all of this gang banging on Facebook, now all of a sudden TikTok starts coming up in the news. We watched this all play out during the summer and fallen into the winter, did we not? Yes, we did. And so this article
Yes, we
today,
did, and and what you actually was bringing up over and over again when this was happening was that there was some kind of questioning of Facebook, Twitter, and some other platform as well, but they didn't invite TikTok. And you say, why do they shy away from TikTok? And then this unravel. Pleasant time.
yeah, so it says Meta paid Republican consulting firm Targeted Victory to orchestrate a campaign against TikTok in the U.S., including placing op-eds in regional news outlets. Let's have a little read of this article, shall we? It says the campaigns include placing letters to the editor in major regional news outlets promoting dubious stories about alleged TikTok trends that actually originated on Facebook and pushing to draw political reporters and local politicians into helping take down its biggest competitor. These bare-knuckle tactics, long commonplace in the world of politics, have become increasingly noticeable within the tech industry, where companies vie for cultural relevance and come at a time when Facebook is under pressure to win back young users. Employees with the firm, called Targeted Victory, worked to undermine TikTok through a nationwide media and lobbying campaign portraying the fast-growing app, owned by the Beijing-based company ByteDance, as a danger to American children and society, according to internal emails shared with the Washington Post. Targeted Victory needs to, quote, get the message out that while Meta is the current punching bag, TikTok is the real threat, especially as a foreign-owned app that is number one in sharing data that young teens are using. A director of the firm wrote in a February email. Yeah, that's precisely. That's what Target Victory needs to do, because that's what Facebook is paying you to do. As Facebook should do. If I was Facebook, I would do the exact same thing. Campaign operatives were also encouraged to use TikTok's prominence as a way to deflect from Meta's own privacy and antitrust concerns. Yeah, because the whole issue was that Facebook's hurting the kids. Yeah, so TikTok's prominence, the fact that the kids are not on Facebook and on TikTok, yeah, we're going to mention that. We're going to bring that point up. We're going to make people aware of that point. That you're accusing us of something, that we're harming kids, when kids don't use our app. They're using this other app called TikTok. Yeah, call us crazy. We're going to mention that. I love the phrasing of this, though. How they try and make something so obvious. They go to great lengths to make it sound sinister. Watch the verbal linguistics, the linguistic gymnastics that are required to do this. Campaign operatives were encouraged to use TikTok's prominence as a way to deflect from Meta's own privacy and antitrust concerns. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you do that? Quote, bonus point if we can fit this into a broader message that the current bill's proposals aren't where state attorney generals or members of the Congress should be focused. Yes, that the emails, which have not been previously reported, show the extent to which Meta and its partners will use opposition research tactics on Chinese-owned multi-billion-dollar rival that has become one of the most downloaded apps in the world, often outranking even Meta's popular Facebook and Instagram apps. Yes, especially with kids, which is precisely the main issue, which was the whole attack against Facebook. The entirety of the issue was that it's harmful to kids. And Facebook knew that the kids aren't using Facebook nearly to the degree that they're using TikTok. And you're expecting them to not bring this fact to the awareness of politicians? Are you in any way? If you are surprised, if you're being accused of something, and you know of your main competitor who's kicking your ass, right? You have a business. You're being you're facing charges that you've done something wrong, and you know that your bigger competitor who's kicking your ass is doing the thing you're being accused of much worse than you are. It wouldn't that be human nature that you would then want the person who's accusing you to know that there's someone else who's doing it much worse than you? I think every 4-year-old child knows this strategy. Every 4-year-old child who has an older sibling instinctively knows this strategy. Kind of like how when giraffes are born, they just somehow magically know how to stand up like 10 minutes after they're born. Most children at the age of around 4, 3.5 instinctively know how to point out when the older sibling has done something to a larger degree, to a bigger degree than they have. As humans, we instinctively know how to do this. No one needs to teach you how to do this. This is human nature at its core. So why are you writing an article about something so fundamental to the human psychology that somebody's pointing out that somebody else was doing something even worse than they were doing to the authorities? In the case of the kids, it's the parents and the siblings. In this case, it's the government and a big tech company versus a rival. Yeah, what's interesting to see from my perspective, is the precise details with how this was manifested. We knew this was going to go on. when we were reading the Facebook files from the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the New York Times, and they were going on and raking Facebook over the coals day after day after day. There was about 12 days in a row where they had all of these headlines where they were going through all of these files. We knew. I specifically said, oh, you better believe Facebook is going to try and inform these politicians that TikTok is the real problem. And we knew they were going to do that. That's just common sense. No one else seemed to know that. We went over that. We mentioned that on a daily basis. And sure enough, that did seem to be happening. We didn't know how it was happening, but now we do know exactly how it happened, how Facebook hired this very particular firm called Targeted Victory. I want to know where they're located. Where's their office? Targeted Victory's located where? We're a digital first agency. Where are you located? Targeted Victory Consultants on Wilson Boulevard on the second floor of Arlington, Virginia. Makes sense. That's where a lot of the policy shit happens. So Targeted Victory on 2311 Wilson Boulevard on the second floor, right next to the Starbucks. Facebook hired them to whisper into the ears of the politicians, because that's how that game is played, and said, hey, you know what? Here's the message. You think we're bad? You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till you see what TikTok's doing. Go ahead and let you go do your thing over there on K Street and let all the politicians know what's going on. And they did. And that's how it happened. They hired this particular firm. Interesting. And now we get to see some of those emails from Targeted Victory to its own internal team members. Why did one of the internal people leak this? Well, they probably have a journalist friend and they thought, hey, you want to see something crazy Facebook hired us to do? Check this out. And it got leaked. No doubt that's how it happened. Employees for the firm, Targeted Victory, worked to undermine TikTok through a national... The emails, which have not been previously reported, show the extent to which they did this. In other emails, Targeted Victory urged partners to push stories to local media tying TikTok to dangerous teen trends in an effort to show the app's purported harms. Any local examples of bad TikTok trend stories in your markets? A targeted staffer asked. Quote, dream would be to get stories with headlines like, from dances to danger, how TikTok has become the most harmful social media space for kids. Yeah, yes. Meta spokesperson Andy Stone defended the campaign by saying, we believe all platforms, including TikTok, should face a level of scrutiny consistent with their growing success. A TikTok spokesperson said the company is deeply concerned about the stoking of local media reports on alleged trends that have not been found on the platform. Targeted Victory worked to amplify negative TikTok coverage through a Google document titled Bad TikTok Clips, which was shared internally and included links to dubious local news stories citing TikTok as the origin of dangerous teen trends. Local operatives working with the firm were encouraged to promote these alleged TikTok trends in their own markets to put pressure on lawmakers to act. One trend Targeted Victory sought to enhance through its work was the Devious Licks Challenge, which showed students vandalizing school property. Through the Bad TikTok's Clips document, the firm pushed stories about the Devious Licks Challenge in local media across Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. The trend led Senator Richard Blumenthal to write a letter in September calling on TikTok executives to testify in front of the Senate subcommittee, saying the app had been repeatedly misused and abused to promote behavior and actions that encourage harmful and destructive acts. But according to an investigation by Anna Foley at the podcast network Gimlet, rumors of the Devious Lick Challenge initially spread on Facebook, not TikTok. In October, Targeted Victory worked to spread rumors of the Slap a Teacher TikTok challenge in local news, touting a local news report on the alleged challenge in Hawaii. In reality, no such challenge existed on TikTok. Again, the rumor started on Facebook, according to a series of Facebook posts first documented by Insider. The firm worked to use both genuine concerns and unfounded anxieties to cast doubt about the popular app. One email outlining recent negative TikTok stories mixed reasonable questions, largely about TikTok's corporate ownership and practices, with more exaggerated stories about young users recording themselves behaving badly the kids of social media panics, the kinds of social media panics that have long bedeviled big social networks, including Facebook. Okay, I would buy all of this if not for the fact that there were schools actually shutting down because of this. And let me be clear: the schools are not didn't and they did shut down. We all know they shut down. We had the parents in the rooms telling us their schools had just got shut down for this. We had people who worked at the teachers from the schools saying our school is dealing with this. And the schools did shut down. And guess what? The schools didn't shut down because some news article. The school shut down because their bathroom got destroyed. The school shut down because a teacher got assaulted. The school shut down because this shit was happening at their schools. So, much like Will Smith and Chris Rock, we could go into a very big debate now because the Washington Post is trying to make the case that this was all a big nothing burger, that all these challenges of slapping teachers, destroying bathrooms, that it was actually Facebook's agency, this PR agency called Targeted Victory, over there in Arlington, Virginia, on the second floor above the Starbucks, was actually the sinister genius behind all of this. Or, and that there was nothing, that these things didn't actually happen, that they were making mountains out of molehills, that there was just rumors percolating that they then blew up into big phantoms based on nothing. Or were schools actually being destroyed and teachers being assaulted and kids overdosing on this stuff? We happen to know the answer to that question. So I want to know, why is the Washington Post trying to make the case that it didn't? And trying to make the case that Facebook hired this agency, which became the Phantom of the Opera, and making this big smokescreen campaign based on nothing. Or were bathrooms being destroyed? Principals spoke to local news agencies, begging parents to take corrective action, actually warned students, you will be expelled if you continue to do this. Does that sound like the results of Facebook hiring a PR campaign? That let's use some critical thinking here.
It'll be interesting, Tyler, when they finally do a study on the increases of damage to schools and attacks on teachers, and actually some turned out fatal. Um, and what the schools, the parents end up doing to the social media companies too, as some more of this stuff comes out. Because you're right, it was pretty horrific. I mean, you even had some students that tracked down a Spanish teacher and did some pretty bad stuff. So all this stuff triggers a lot of things, and we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, could we just Tyler, your predictions in this space have come true one after another, um, and I think very revealing and very insightful. The one thing I think collectively we need to be sure we do is to while we're doing the comparative whatabouts. Um, I think it's important we all condemn escalation of physical violence, no matter what the source is, whether it's the Academy Awards or TikTok or Facebook. And we condemn all social media when they fall flat on their faces for intercepting um, violent stuff or socially hostile stuff to get eyeballs on screens. I think we're at risk of being distracted about the whatabouts back and forth. which are valid and worth pointing out. I'm not saying it's not worth pointing out, but I think the meta issue, no pun intended, is that we need more self-regulation of limiting hostile acts and racist, misogynist comments as much as possible until such time, and that there's a better regulatory framework, a la revision of Section 230, to address some of these issues more effectively.
Cues.
And I didn't mean that as a buzzkill, because everything you point out is valid, it's novel, and your predictions have come true. I just want to see that energy targeted towards um, broad-based
Hey,
approaches to
hey, John.
stopping the escalation. Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't a buzzkill. The question that I have is, where does personal responsibility and values and all that come into the freedom of social media, and how is that to be managed and regulated?
Oh, great question. And
Great question.
life imitates art, which imitates life, which imitates art, which imitates life. So, to the extent that we all have an accountability to break that, to manage that cycle, to mitigate that cycle, I think we all have tremendous social responsibility. So, I accept the challenge; it's valid. But when you've got, you know, oligarchs and billionaires profiting off of promoting conflict and violence, the individual and the collective action of individuals is very challenging, particularly when you have natural monopolies in social media that capture an audience that has pretty much exclusive access to their demographic. So Facebook's demographic has shifted. TikTok has created a demographic and taking it from Facebook. So they have positioned themselves with natural monopolies in different inside different demographics, but nonetheless they exploit the same bad behavior and amplify it to where art imitating life amplifies the bad behavior in life. So yes, to your point, 100%, it's a yes and not a yes but.
So the zombie apocalypse is possible then, if we can't control ourselves.
You know, I was taken aback hearing the news that even the Academy Award, the rating spiked greatly. Like I forgot the percentage. There is like crazy percentage right after Will Smith hit Chris. So I don't know what it says about us that when we hear these types of things that we are drawn into it. So I think social media is feeding us because of what they think we are looking for and why we get engaged much more when these things happen. So I
I,
was really, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with that, with one exception. So they're not targeting what they determine we want. They're targeting what we want that will make them more profit and eyes on glass. So there's lots of things we want to see that don't happen because they can't be monetized by these natural monopolies. So yes, there's a big overlap between what we want and what we get, but there's a huge filter of what's monetizable by the monopolistic platforms.
And John and Messi and Tyler and group, what does it say about us when, I'll give you an example. Somebody, a retired VP from Def Jam, sent me a note yesterday saying Chris Rock's tickets went from under $40 for his comedy show to over close to $350. You
Yeah,
see how the
that,
market drove the
yeah.
pricing on that?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And like when I think CNN or somebody was reporting it, what they said was like the minute that incident happened, and I guess we're in social media somewhere that we knew it was happening because apparently it wasn't like watching it live. So as soon as they knew, they heard the news, like they said huge amount, like 500,000, just some crazy number, just jumped in like a minute after it happened. It just is crazy. And the viewership, they said, was after slumping badly before, all of a sudden after the incident, it just picked. Isn't that crazy?
I'm just reading the whole article. It's from Taylor Lorenz, who used to be at the New York Times, and now she's at the Washington Post. And it just the main thrust of the article is that this PR agency was trying to bring more visibility to negative things happening on TikTok, especially with regard to kids. Yes, but the fundamental question is: did these negative things happen on TikTok uh, for in actuality, or was it purely a PR campaign based on nothing? Or I don't think I think these things actually did happen. That kids actually did hit teachers because we actually know the names of the teachers that were hit. We know the names of the kids who were expelled. We know the names of the schools and the cities they went to. We know on one particular tech news touched on somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen schools that we know firsthand that were shut down from parents in the room who jumped on stage to comment that their school was also in the process of having a day off or whatnot. So how is it possible that dozens of school principals are going separately to news channels to express their concern about what's happening on TikTok, and that those principles, none of them are mentioned in this article, for example? Well, it's because that isn't manufactured PR wizardry. That is legitimate grassroots actuality, that those principals were legitimately concerned. Their bathrooms actually were destroyed. And we know that because the videos are on TikTok. And the question is, did the kids on TikTok, were they which it's a chicken and egg, it's a cart and a horse scenario. Did Facebook, but they're actually not even being accused of this. Taylor Lorenz in this piece is not accusing Facebook of creating these campaigns and driving this negative activity on TikTok. She's just not even acknowledging that these things happened on TikTok at all. She's not taking the
You know,
perspective that
hey Tyler,
Facebook.
another.
She's essentially taking the perspective or creating the narrative that these things in actuality weren't actual real problems on TikTok, and Facebook was trying to bring attention to something that didn't really warrant attention and that really fundamentally wasn't actually really a problem. When in reality, Facebook was trying to bring attention to something that actually was a real problem that real people were involved with real names and real locations and real consequences. And is there a problem with that exactly, Taylor Lorenz? If these things actually happened and these schools actually shut down, which by the way they did, we know they did, what's wrong with Facebook drawing attention to them? What's wrong
It
with
would have
Facebook?
been nice if the article, Tyler, would have been nice if the article would have said, by virtue of hiring a publicist or a PR firm to look into this and shout it out that it's a problem, is it adding to the problem that you're highlighting?
Well, it would if elementary school kids read the Wall Street Journal, because
Exactly.
then they would be influenced to be like, oh shit, what's going on? There's a TikTok challenge going on. Good thing I am reading the business section of the Wall Street Journal and I can figure this out as an 8-year-old. So either 8-year-olds are reading the business section of the Wall Street Journal to figure out how to get more people to watch them on TikTok, or they were figuring this out on TikTok and copying other people who were doing this on TikTok and looking to get views. Common sense tells me these kids who were destroying the bathrooms and slapping their teachers didn't learn about it from the business section of the Wall Street Journal. They learned about it from TikTok. So either
Yeah.
Taylor should probably concede that these things happened. She doesn't deny that they did or didn't. She's implying that they didn't. There's an implication that Facebook was itself making mountains out of molehills by implying that, they went above and beyond in trying to disparage their competitor. Well, you should probably make some assessment as to how legitimate Facebook's claims are, because you're implying that this article is implying that the Facebook's claims are illegitimate. I would argue that they're not. I would argue if I was Facebook, I would want to bring awareness to the tragedies that are resulting on TikTok. Um, I don't see anything wrong with what Facebook's doing in this case. If that shit was happening on TikTok, and I think it was, because the regular stuff that you would expect to see happened. You had school principals going to local media and warning parents, and it's saying, we will expel your stupid kids if they can, and we will punish you, as we'll hold you as the parents responsible if this keeps happening. That's exactly what you would see happening in an authentic, organic scenario, which is what happened. So why is Taylor Lorenz implying that it didn't? That it was purely Facebook and this PR agency doing some narrative craft?
Because narrative craft is occurring at this very moment as well. Bum, bum, bum.
And the funny thing is, Tyler, I wonder if I can jump in here. This is Pat.
Go ahead, Pat.
I wasn't really, thank you. I wasn't really concentrating. So I think it was John who was saying something and he used the word exploitation. And I think that is absolutely it for me anyway. We have this propensity as human beings to, whether it's survival mode or whatever, seek advantage, to exploit, to look after ourselves. And that is what gets us into so much hot water. And I'm just hoping that what's happening around the world today, whether it's through TikTok or Facebook or the war in Ukraine or on Wall Street or wherever, that we actually see. And technology, the social media, is enabling us to see all the different farces that happen, including what Will Smith did on the academies the other night. And for whatever reason that happened or didn't happen, as we think we saw happen, it's this exposure to social media and the content that we all, even little children, can see and learn from, and realize that exploitation at any level is absolutely atrocious because we feel the outcome of it very, very sadly and badly. And it's becoming more and more. And it's quite scary, I think, actually, because every day, every page you turn, every social media account you hear, every discussion is about somebody somewhere being exploited. And that is just diabolical because it doesn't get us anywhere. So I'm hoping that technology will solve its way through all that. And the human impulses are definitely a big hurdle to get through. That's just my 2 pence worth. Thank you.
Welcome to the age of digital opium.
Hey, Pat, question. Are humans inherently kind?
I believe so. I do believe that humans are inherently good. There is something, though, that trips us over into bad, in that whether it's self-preservation or survival or whatever it is. But we have the brain, I believe. We have the intellect. We have the human consciousness that, we actually can do better than that. And I think we don't believe ourselves sometimes, and we don't. We choose the easy way, and it's such a cliche to say that. I know, because it seems too easy, but I just wish that we'd all make a conscious effort to just look at that. That sometimes, if we take the easy way out, it denies all the good that's in us. Sorry, Robert, is that okay? Does that answer, or did I
Oh, no,
deviate?
absolutely. Just wanted your opinion. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, so next story. Financial Times says they have sources that the big chip maker ARM plans to transfer shares from its China joint venture, which it has struggled to control and audit, to SoftBank to speed up its New York listing. There's a whole rabbit hole to jump down there. We won't today, but maybe We will later when they do their New York listing, and we can recap that whole crazy shenanigans. The next is from The Verge that Google Ads expanded Markdown support to docs on the web off by default as part of its autocorrect feature. An alternative to keyboard shortcuts, Google is adding Markdown support to Google Docs on the web, letting you format your document using text shortcuts rather than keyboard shortcuts. The next is from the Wall Street Journal. Says they have sources that China is planning expanded restrictions on its huge live streaming industry, including capping daily tipping and tighter content censorship. Gee, I wonder why. Why is China worried about live streamers? Why would they be worried about people talking live to large audiences in real time? It says China's planning new curbs on the country's $30 billion live streaming industry. Jeez, I wonder what they might be paranoid about. According to people familiar with the matter, renewing a regulatory campaign aimed at reining in technology companies and exerting greater influence over the content consumed by its people. Oh, I see. So they're concerned about the content that people are consuming from live streams. They're worried that a live streamer might share some content that they don't want shared. Because live streams are a place that are a little more tricky to control what gets said. Because it's happening right now, live, and you're not in the studio with them to control what they say. Chinese authorities are drafting new regulations to cap internet users' daily monetary spending on digital tipping, said people familiar with the situation. Officials are also planning to set a daily limit on how much live streamers can receive from fans and are considering imposing tighter censorship over content, some of the people said. China's main internet regulator didn't respond to requests for comments. Oh, what a surprise. I assume they would just explain to you their incredible paranoia of the potential for people to cause a revolution over live streams. Live streaming apps, which showcase user-generated content from influencers and ordinary people on a range of topics, including gaming, music, food, and shopping, have exploded in popularity in China in recent years as the number of mobile internet users in China soars and demand for fresh content grows. The China Association of Performing Arts valued the country's live streaming industry at the equivalent of about $30 billion last year. 2020. Live streaming services in China include those operated by social media giants ByteDance and what is that? Help me out, baby. QISHO technology and
快手, it means quick count, 快手. Yeah,
and
快手.
Huya are consumed by roughly 70% of the country's internet users, according to state-run Chinese Internet Network Information Center, commanding an audience of more than 700 million people. Many live streaming influencers earn commissions on products that they promote, but for many of them, a key revenue stream comes in the forms of tips and virtual gifts, ranging from the equivalent of 15 cents for a virtual beer to more than $1,000 for a virtual spaceship. Popular live streamers are backed by professional marketing teams and can earn tens of thousands of dollars each day in direct donations from fans. The most sought-after live streaming hosts can earn millions in brand endorsements and sponsorships. Any attempt to regulate this booming segment of the online world would follow in the footsteps of other efforts to clamp down and clean up behavior on the internet, particularly for young people. In the past year, China has cracked down on for-profit education providers, rallied against the evils of what it describes as a culture of celebrity worship, and set strict limits on the amount of time minors can spend playing computer games. These and other regulatory actions last year hit investors confident in Chinese stocks, sparking steep sell-offs in shares of e-commerce and gaming businesses. Blah, 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 blah.
And I have a lot on this because right now for young people, they see all this influencer, all this social commerce could make a fortune overnight. So the kids don't want to join the traditional jobs anymore, and that might cause problem for CCP as well. So Um, that's one of the reasons to regulate all this. You may say the booming e-commerce, tech, and all these platforms, and of course for the common prosperity as well. So to redistribute with the traditional communism theory, but with a modern way. And with that, I'm done.
Let me unpack just something real quickly. That in China, live streamers must be registered, that their face is registered with a facial recognition system so that when you live stream, it is the identity is confirmed of the live streamer in real time so that you can be held accountable if you say something that the state would prefer you not say. And if somebody appears in your live stream, if a face appears in a live stream that isn't registered, the stream quickly, abruptly ends for fear that that unregistered person will be able to say something and not pay the consequences for what they're saying. I think if we connect those two dots, we can plausibly conclude that the CCP is paranoid about people saying things without paying the consequences, saying things that they don't want people to hear. Like, hey, how about we all rush to Tiananmen Square next Wednesday and take our government back? Something tells me that the CCP wouldn't like that. How do I know that? Well, because the word Tiananmen Square doesn't exist on the internet in any context. It's
Yeah,
effective,
you can, yeah, zero search result if you using China's search engine like Baidu or Weibo, whatever you use.
which is their version of Google, by the way. Kind of interesting that their version of Google bans any mentions of Tiananmen Square. The CCP has completely, utterly
Full
erased,
control.
perfectly erased any mention of the Tiananmen Square massacre or revolution or whatever you want to call it. And
Or
Tank,
even the number is 64. Yeah.
even the date that it happened. Or Tank Man, which is the guy standing in front of the lines of tanks. That image doesn't exist. And I'm going to mute you, Eric. Your mic sounds really bad. But my point is, add that dot to the series of dots to connect, and now you understand why China's so paranoid about live streamers and insists on controlling them and not allowing unknown entities from even having the potential to do any live streams. And I would argue that the recent clampdowns on Jack Ma specifically and other big tech moguls who have a lot of power and a lot of data, which, if used against the CCP, could inflict an incredible amount of damage to the CCP. And I have to give credit, as I always do, to the CCP for being intelligent enough to know a threat when they see it. And that shit is a legitimate, it is a bit paranoid, but they have every reason to be paranoid. And they want to control that shit. And boy, are they great at it. Holy shit, are they great at it. They're amazing at it. And
So what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do, Tyler, if Jack Ma ends up becoming, or we find out he's actually a part of the Communist Party?
well, uh,
Even he's not, in the group of President
No,
Xi. So
no,
that's
no. But I'm
why.
just saying, just following Tyler's thing. You know what I mean, Tyler? Like that would be the ultimate movie twist.
If I can throw something out there, because I have to run in a bit. But I think I've mentioned this before too. It's really interesting how social media is in China because I actually closely linked to TikTok, our previous article. How TikTok is in China is completely different from how it is here. Like they have complete advertisement segments that are used like the back in the day I've seen on TV. That these people like are part of. They almost like it's like a controlled, centralized way. It's very different from here, where users figure it out themselves. It's extremely organized. Some of these like organizations go public for funding. They fund these people and they sell a lot of products, in small 30-minute, 15-minute intervals. So I could see why.
next, or anyway, the point I'm
And
making,
normally, if just like Tyler said, if some the host for the live streaming said something against the CCP. Actually, they will find this guy heavily, and in our country it's called 杀鸡儆猴, the carrot kitchen to make the monkey fear. So yeah, so officially they make the restrictions even more publicly, but at the same time they do it with the punishment that will make people censor themselves as well.
How long do we think China can keep this up? I mean, it feels like they're surrounded by water. They're trying to keep out. The
Ben, I
water
was
becomes more.
just literally thinking that. I was going to say, what happens when this shit show? What happens when the waves, reverse on this shit show? Not
Here,
just China, but just, other countries around the world doing this. I mean,
okay,
it's just
It,
getting
here's my
it's
extreme.
totally floated by the economy. Once the economy crashes, it's a
great
new
point.
day.
Great point. So, by the way, that's why Russia is so interesting at the moment, which is sure Putin might have a whole lot of fans at the moment. As the economy continues to crater, it's conceivable that those Putin fans will lose their affections for dear leader, and nine meals, uh, nine
9 meals from
nine
separating
meals,
civilization from anarchy.
yeah. So, or from a revolution. So, if we might see the Russians actually grab the pitchforks, metaphorically and almost literally, to take the country back because there's no more food on the shelves. That scene has played out dozens, if not hundreds, of times. In human civilizations over the eras, and it's already happened in Russia in one sense a couple of times. They've had a couple of revolutions already. So there's that. Then there's the Chinese version of this. In that Tiananmen Square was exactly that. Tiananmen Square was the students said enough is enough, and they all ran to Tiananmen Square. And they said you need to step down, and we're bringing this back. We want our country back. And the army showed up with their tanks and their guns and opened fire. And as I was saying previously, this is such a critical moment in the history of many countries. We just saw video in Ukraine near Mariupol. There was a town taken over by a Russian military team, and the Ukrainian citizens, not the Ukrainian fighters, but Ukrainian citizens, got together en masse and marched towards them in the center of town. And the Russian military opened fire, thankfully, with the guns pointed in the air and not at the people. And the Ukrainians, hundreds of them, you can see this, I tweeted it to my own Twitter account, there's hundreds of them all marching, towards the Russians. And there's actually multiple videos from multiple Ukrainian cities where I've seen of this amazing phenomena where the Ukrainians are marching towards the Russians are firing into the air as the Russians start backpedaling, and when the gunfire starts, the people marching towards the people with the guns at that moment have to make a very critical decision to continue going forward or to flee. And if they flee, they're essentially handing over their country, or at least that city. And if they continue to march forward, they risk their lives to maintain their independence and freedom. And the question is, what are they going to do? And in those videos that were now captured, and Evan retweeted mine, whatever, the Ukrainians are marching forward. The Russians shoot machine guns in the air, and the Ukrainians pause for a split second and then continue forward as if to say, we've all decided, we're risking our lives, we understand the cost, we're willing to risk our lives for freedom and our independence. And the Russians backpedal, and they took their city back. And the question is, when will the Russians themselves do that in Red Square? Because that's what will need to happen. And that's not my own, of course I believe that, but so do many Russian opinion pieces that are coming out lately, which is that it's that no Western force can force a regime change in Russia. Only the Russians themselves can actually force a regime change in Russia, in very much in the way that I'm describing. And the question is, at what point will the Russians do that? And somebody's going to say, well, not enough of them They have Putin has too many supporters. Well, yes, today he does. Let's wait 6 months after these sanctions take hold, and let's come back and see how those Putin supporters are feeling in 6 months. That's the whole point of the sanctions, by the way. Now, that's where it turns back to China, because you better believe I worked in Hong Kong. The Hong Kongers, the friends of mine who are old school, legit Hong Kongers, absolutely abhor the CCP. And we know this because they had some of the biggest protests in modern history, millions of them. 2 million out of 7 million marched through central Hong Kong to show their disdain for what's going on, what the CCP is bringing to Hong Kong. So now, if the mainland Chinese folks don't like what's happening, and I think that's a safe assumption at this point, somebody raised the question, Ben or somebody, how long will this continue? At what point will enough be enough? And they have to revisit the Tiananmen Square round two, where we know the CCP won round one by firing bullets into the crowd, and the crowd dissipated, and threw in the towel on round one. At some point, enough will be enough. There will be a round two. It might be 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. But at some point, it will happen. And will that moment, no doubt it will be caught on video next time, as everything is these days. And will they, when the bullets start firing, will the folks run or will they continue to press forward? That ultimately, usually, historically, ends up being the critical detail at that critical moment. And here I say all of that because due to technology, due to your phone, due to the smart speaker in your house, due to what Russia and the CCP are now on the brinks of doing, and some might argue have already done, is created a system where they're already able to tell who are the people whispering to each other about wanting to escalate round two and preemptively removing them, thus removing the possibility of ever having a round two to challenge their power of authority. And I would argue that the CCP has effectively already reached that point where they're able to preemptively neuter any threat of a revolution due to their surveillance systems.
Yeah, Tyler, this is
Um,
because they play the very long game, right? You have people who are in power, Putin 20 years, Xi Jinping supposedly for life, and we change, our leaders every 4 to 8 years, at least in the executive branch. And I'm very suspicious of, being pulled by the nose through the mainstream media. I know all the things that we've heard, I've heard them too, but I guess this is by nature, or maybe I've developed into a contrarian. I don't, when everybody starts going one way and following the news, I get very suspicious and I'm forced to look the other way. And so I've been reading a lot about, like, supposedly the big game. Like, what if Russia's war in Ukraine and the response of the Western world to try and financially deplatform Russia ends up destroying the dollar as the world's reserve currency? And what if it hastens the end of the U.S. geopolitical empire? There's a couple of big what ifs. But I've mentioned before that I think Ukraine is the right hand of the magician, and the game's being played where we're not looking, on the left hand. And so there was a British historian named Alfred Mackinder, and you and I are both fans of Peter Zeihan, but it was actually Alfred Mackinder who first coined the word, geopolitics. And he argued that there was a natural, quote unquote, world island that would serve as the seat of global power. And so the Eurasian and African landmasses control roughly 50% of the world's resources. And any power able to control this centralized landmass would have an effective stranglehold on the world's natural resources. So at the center of that world island is what he calls the heartland. And it goes from Eastern Europe and the steppe, previously controlled by Russia and the Soviets. And this centralized position of the heartland makes it possible for control of this quote unquote world island. And what he said in 1904 was that, and this is a quote, whoever rules East Europe commands the heartland. Whoever rules the heartland commands the world island. And whoever rules the world island commands the war. Now, I think you and I agree, Tyler, that, we reached a point in all of our reading over the last few years that geography shapes history. And so when we talk about geopolitics, we're talking about the influence of geography on the evolution and the power of regions, nations, and states. So Napoleon once said, to know a nation's geography is to know its foreign policy, right? And so when Mackinder gave a speech at the Royal Geographical Society, and this was like over 100 years ago in like early 1900s, it was called a geographical pivot of history. And, and it talked about the relationship of geography and power. So what he says is that the world island is this Eurasian landmass. And if you manipulate the map of the world by turning it 90 degrees to the left, the world island becomes in the focus, all right? And it puts China at the top through Siberia, the steppe, and Russia. And he describes the edges of the world island as the rimland. So he says that, and when he was writing this, the Trans-Siberian Railroad was being built across Russia. And he thought that the railroads would connect the rimland and the heartland. So anyway, this zone, okay, in addition to most of the world's resources, has over 60% of the world's landmass. And, by the way, 3 billion people. Okay, so his theory was based on land power. But what happened is, one thing he couldn't foresee was the influence of sea power on history, right? Because he wrote this in like 1890, and he also couldn't see, air power and airplanes. And so basically, if you look at the foreign policy of the British and the United States, which were truly the only global naval powers in history that literally encompassed the whole world, it was basically to encircle and contain and police this quote unquote world island. And most of the wars, he says, like in India, Afghanistan, the Middle East, the Balkans, and Central Europe, were ways to prevent a central power from emerging that would dominate the heartland and rule the world. So, he didn't know about airplanes, okay? And air power became more decisive than sea power or land power in World War II, right? And it's not to underestimate the influence of sea power because, the Japanese were starting with their sea power at the start of World War II. We were able to end that, but the sea power and the air power have led to this booming global trade and globalization, right? He couldn't foresee that. And technology and globalization seem to have like trumped geography for the better part of the 20th century. And it negated the land power and so forth. So the question really was, when you look at him, like if we look at finances and so forth, was Mackinder wrong, or was he simply early in his thinking about the control of this land power? So is China about to become its industrial and demographic power with Russia's energy and food sources to finally create this world island? Here's the thing. Think about this. World War I was a straight up duel between land powers, right? And the thing about this is that if you look after that, the United States retained its global power through navy and superiority of air power. And it's expanded beyond that. We had superiority in space, satellites, et cetera. And, even the worldwide satellite communication system, the Five Eyes Alliance that we talk about, is the backbone of U.S. power today. So from surveillance to communication and coordination, navigation, GPS, the U.S. global power depends more on the skies than the seas or the land. But this could be an incredible Achilles heel because his theory of global power derived from geography is not dead. And the problem is Beijing has been reading his document. Why do you think China's come up with the One Belt, One Road project, which aims to unite this world island and create a common market for 3 billion people? You don't need, like, you can escape the naval global power at that point. You capture the world's energy and the food reserves in one great unification of power. And in that scenario, the United States and Britain's sea power fully succumbs to the land power of this world island. China's got an army of 300 million people. Now, I'm not a religious guy, but I used to be a born again Christian when I was in college. And I remember reading the book of Revelations, and it talked about in the end of times, there would be the commander of the north, which translated from ancient Hebrew was a tribe that it said city of Moscow. It talks about the land of the south, which is the king of the south, which sits on riches, which is supposed to be the Middle East and the Arab countries sitting on oil. Talks about Israel. It talks about the commander, the king of the west, which is in the form of a 10-nation confederacy, which is ancient Rome. It's Europe basically. Okay. It talks about the king of the east with an army of 300 million
I
soldiers.
was tracking you until you went religious.
I'm not religious. I'm not religious.
I'm,
Remember,
I'm with you
I'm
know
an
what?
agnostic.
Hold on.
Okay. Okay.
I'm totally. I'm going to back up Jorge on this one. As somebody who grew up in a private Christian school, who read the Book of Revelations endlessly because it's truly it has nothing to do with religion whatsoever.
It's
Uh,
fascinating.
it's fascinating. It's a fascinating prediction by ostensibly was it John or Paul in a cave
John.
who may or may not have been on mushrooms is kind of the more current theory, and it's wildly interesting watching the world today and just the book of Revelation. If you haven't read the book of Revelations, go read it. Nothing
This
to
is
do.
like a
Hold
weekly
on.
No,
conversation with
no,
my brother and
let
I,
me
Tyler.
Nothing. I
let
know,
me
but
finish
I mean,
here.
keep religion out of it. Just read it, and
Yes,
don't think for 1 second about religion or Jesus. You can read Revelations
I
and
think
not
of the geopolitical movements
totally.
within the Revelation and then compare it to now. It is
Sharon, hold
extremely
on. Let
fascinating.
me finish this here. I want to clarify that I was raised a good Catholic boy, and then I rebelled against that, and then I became an atheist, and then I was like, well, you can't prove a negative, and you can't. I'm firmly ensconced in my, let's say, spiritual view as an agnostic. I have no idea whether God exists or not. So what I'm saying is, I'm just telling you what I read. It
Right.
doesn't have anything to do with what
It
I
really,
believe
yeah,
in.
correct. It has nothing to do with. You can read Revelation and be enthralled by it without any thought of really Christianity at all. It's you can think about the technological, the geopolitical issues that it talks about, the wars and the famines and the this. It's wildly crazy, interesting prediction of the end of the world,
Yeah.
and it's
So
bizarrely applicable to
yeah,
where we find ourselves in the 21st century. It's bizarre. It's truly bizarre.
yes, it is. So listen. Okay. So as somebody who's an agnostic, when I went back and was like, holy fuck. All right. If you're a seeker of truth, that means you have to try to connect the dots. You don't care if it's in the book of Mormon or Islam or Christianity or a history book. You're trying to connect the dots. So in my trying to connect the dots, I said, I'm looking at what's happening geopolitically, and I'm looking at Mackinder's theory of global power and geography and land power, and I'm saying, where did I read that before? Oh yeah, Book of Revelations talks about in the end of the times that the king of the east, which is China, is going to have mobilized his army of 300 million people on land because you can't do it by sea. There's not enough ships to do it by sea. You can't do it by air. The only way is by land. And that they would have these great roads connect to the west. All right. So then, okay, here's the other thing, though. I mean, this One Belt, One Road project, if they connect Shanghai to Paris, why, they don't have to worry about the Navy. It now goes back to land power. And, I don't know. I mean, it's also peculiar to me that in the book of Revelations, there's no mention of the United States. There's
George,
no mention of it. And
the
here,
after
here's one
uh,
last thing. Let me
all
let me let me land this. I don't know
Go ahead,
who's
go
trying to
ahead,
interrupt
land it,
there,
and
but
then we'll go to Fong.
okay. So the last thing, and Ben, I would like your take on this. It talks about a world economic system, right? That's either on your hand or your head. And at the time when I was a teenager reading, it's like, what the fuck? Like, what is it? What are they talking about?
Right.
You know? But it was
Yep.
an economic system. Do we or do we not now have the technology for that to happen?
Yeah.
So anyhow, here's my landing of this thing. Okay, I think that whether you put the whole religious thing out of it and just look at it from a secular point of view,
Yeah.
this is where the magician's left hand is going. That China is going to have, it's going to take time, but they're going to have most of those reserves from energy and natural resources from Russia. They've got this 3 billion people marketplace. They can avoid naval power. And to me, it just seems like with this sanctioning of the SWIFT system, they're creating their own SWIFT system, that the dollar's importance is going to be going down. That is scary to me. And yeah, it is the reason why I have Bitcoin. It's not just to chase price action, but this whole thing is scary to me in just from a pure secular sense. Sorry for taking up so much time,
I
Tyler.
got you. Fong, you wanted to say?
yeah. Speaking of former naval officer, I can tell you the land-based theory. That's an old theory and no longer valid. You can point out a lot of country, a big country, but don't have technologies, don't have a naval presence. They're not going to be powerful. This technology, we if we learn from the pandemic, the tech war right now is not about land. It's actually now morphed into the battle of leadership. Who has the core technology like 5Gs or satellites, artificial intelligence, semiconductors. One of the key area right now was the war between U.S. and China on tech war, whether or not we can get company like Apple or Tesla to bring back some of that investment. Or a company like Samsung, for example, still depend South Koreans still depend China for investment. Samsung Electronics as well as SKs still rely on China. But their alliances are forming. Obviously, Japan, obviously China, and other country now, Australia too, right, moving back. So, yeah. So I guess the old books are talking about land a lot, but nowadays I think that the ship has sailed. I can tell you the reason. U.S. is powerful now because the naval presence. We can have any airport. It's a mobile force, so for deterrence. So that's why I think China right now try to build their own, as you know, build their own aircraft carrier. They bought one of the old Soviet aircraft carrier and try to build and put planes on those, but. You have to understand, it's no longer the past. I think the books in the past, and they were talking about technology war and other. With regarding to energies, yeah, one that transformed the energy transform over from fossil fuel energy to clean energies as and that's those going to collapse, and that's the things is. People refer Russia, it's just a gas station of the world. But that gas station, when it winning off from it, as a European doing right now, transform to other technologies. Yeah, it's gone not going to be the economy not growing very well either. Look at Russia, last 10 years. Yeah, compared with other, they are black behind. So this is Fong and complete.
Okay.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is when those countries get pushed in the corner, okay, we know that demographically they're losing their population. Okay, what do you do when you have a dog that's backed into a corner? He comes out and he starts biting. Well, the dog is biting. And so I don't know. Look, listen, I'm for us, right? I'm an American and all that stuff. But I just I'm just very skeptical of the mainstream press. So all it takes is one aircraft carrier to be sunk with a hypersonic missile, or a U.S. satellite to be shot out of the sky with some laser, or a Russian electromagnetic pulse. I think we're looking at things the way they stand now, and the way they did, and I'm trying to look and see what's coming. I mean, I think that McCander was probably early in his vision of this land power. And we've had the last 100 years with sea power and after World War II, air power. But if they connect this Europe with Asia, with the One Belt, One Road project, it's going to be different. The world will not be the same way. And then you combine that with countries leaving the SWIFT system, which they are, okay, especially the BRIC countries, things are changing, my friend. It's not, you're looking at the way things stand now and the way they stood. I'm looking at now, not saying I know the future, but I'm questioning and I'm wondering because I know that we're going through a shift. So we can't keep looking at things the way they are. We have to see what's coming.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I
think
can
you're
Jordan,
only
good
right,
look at
question.
the
Jorge.
That was
present and use the present to predict future, but I'm not looking at the past. A lot of time, the past not no longer relevant. I can tell you a lot of books for economics to war strategy in the past is no longer present. People are talking about at one of Zero, famous Zero, talking about amateur talk about and study strategy, but professional talking about logistics. So all about logistics, and I can tell you the ocean is the vast oceans is make up most majority of the world right now is in the ocean, not land. So I disagree on that part.
And
Okay.
where I agree with
Okay.
Jorge is that
I,
actually, sorry, who was that? Would you can I go ahead, or was that Jorge replying to Fong?
Go ahead, Pat.
Sorry. Okay. I just wanted to say that while I agree with Jorge that there are things that are on the way, change that's happening, I think we really have no idea exactly where that change is going, and even China. So if I read some of the news reports properly, I realize that the Belt and Road projects have almost ground to a halt in that there's no further great progress happening there. Maybe on the ground, there might be still a few people working on the physical, actually, Belt and Road, but I think the idea is hanging loose. And I really don't know that China even knows how this is all responding, because we have all been affected by whatever has happened in Russia and Ukraine. The whole world has been affected, the economy, and I think we have seen the potential for huge amounts of personal damage, whether you're right or left or in between, strong or weak, there are repercussions, and people are walking quite tentatively now, I think. It's interesting to know, though, to realize, and I've thought about this, and this is my conclusion, mine only, that domination is still the key thing. It's not about whoever's theory from the 1890s or whatever, but domination is still the controlling force amongst the nations. And it's through that domination that we are seeing all this pull and pushing now. And tragically, we, the ordinary person, the average citizen, is part of this because we feel it in the pockets. Yes, we also feel it in the heart and in the brain, because social media and all of that, the internet, has helped us realize how difficult it is and what games are being played. And I think the change is not just with the leaders, the change is with us too. And the sooner, the faster that happens, the better, because we are the ones who are going to be able to call the shots now. And that is how it's going to be different from the past, is where I think it's
Pat,
going to go.
I don't know the future either. What I'm saying is sometimes when we read the mainstream media, we think that we do know what the future is. That's what I'm calling into question. I have no idea what's going to happen. There's a lot of factors, but I'm looking the other way and just bringing these things up for consideration, because it seems like when people read the mainstream media, they just believe it. They're like, oh, the mainstream media and our leaders are telling us what's happening, what's going to happen, and we just believe it without questioning. That is what's scary to me. That's the danger, and that's what I'm trying to point out. Some other ways to look at things, just so that we don't take things on faith. Right? To me, faith
So
is the F word.
Absolutely.
Can
Ask the
I'd
I
like to
question
can
bring
what
I
a,
I
su-
a
always
slightly
find. Yes.
can I suggest something that may bring new life to McCander's thesis, and that is that Xi attempted to nationalize a lot of the whole Jack Ma and its replicas across Chinese industry, and it's kind of backfired because it sort of operates under the thesis of shifting wealth from the bourgeoisie to the proletariat, ignoring the fact that there's a large emerging middle class in China, and there's probably a simmering backlash from the middle class as their stock portfolios have been devalued by Xi's actions. And so if you compound that with the likely eventual collapse of the leadership of the heavy-handed leadership of Russia, a la Putin, with his becoming a pariah on the global stage, how does Xi think about the threat versus the opportunity of a failed state in Russia that could propagate to China or could represent alternatively an opportunity to further McCander's thesis of a Belt and Road Initiative that now includes Russia, because China could have if not political control over Russia, could turn it into economic control. So that's a bit Machiavellian and it's a bit unprecedented, but it's not entirely unprecedented. And it could in effect save Xi from the threat of a collapsing autocracy in Russia propagating into China and convert it into a furtherance of the Belt and Road Initiative, a la McCander's proposition. So, the changing geopolitical and technological landscape offer up opportunities that might resurrect old ideas.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake we made was not, you know, getting Russia, let's say, butting up to Russia to be part of, let's say, our thought, thinking, geopolitics to contain China. And there was an opportunity. I remember reading Tony Blair's books, and he remembers when he was flying with Putin and they were looking at the Chechen areas, and Putin was the first one to reach out to the United States after 9/11. Like that was the time when, and Putin was fairly new into his position. That was the time to, reach out and to establish that. That time is
But they
lost.
did try to reach out. They did reach out. And this is where it's got us today. Because in reaching out, there were certain things that were
He
promised by the powers that be in Russia and the various oligarchs and other people who liberally went overseas and took their money with them. Great. But this is where we are today.
Yeah, but you got to remember, again, I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm looking at his worldview to understand. Like when you play chess, you have to think how your opponent is thinking, right? And so he set out several red lines for us, and we kept crossing those red lines. One of those red lines early on is that Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. And I think we undermined that. And I think we threw him the other way. So we didn't reach out, Pat. I think we actually slapped him in the face.
Well, actually, with all of that, they crossed an unspoken red line, was where the Russian system decided that it was going to try and infiltrate the way democracy and elections and the media and all that were handled in the West. So how does that fit into the big plan?
Well, that comes back to Tyler's point. At what point do we have, self accountability? So you have kids being influenced by TikTok to go ahead and slap their teachers. We're not kids, we're adults. Are you saying that, you can't decide for yourself whether there's some guy who's looking at the mall at his inauguration address and saying, we've got the largest attended inauguration in history. Meanwhile, you can see that the place is half empty, right? And people are still going to go
Exactly.
ahead and believe what he says. So at some point, where does self accountability take place? And this is, I think a great deal of it has to do with the dumbing down of our educational system and the lack of critical thinking in this country. I mean, and that's why I say faith to me is the F word. It's you're covering your eyes, you're covering your ears, and you're just listening to what your leader's saying. And it doesn't matter whether it's Trump saying that or Biden saying, hey, inflation's, some people think inflation's caused by, excess government spending. I'm here to tell you it's not. But you're going to have people on the left who are going to blindly believe that bullshit, right? And that's the problem. Both sides put faith in their leaders and faith in the media. And I'm saying you can't do that.
because each side thinks they know best and they are better than the other. That can't go down anymore.
Okay, so back to the tech headlines. There's a bunch of money
Tyler,
making. Yeah,
Can I just point you guys to Stephen Kotkin, professor, and his some of this is our demonization's the problem.
I, I'll add a final thought there, which is again back to the anthropological underpinnings where we find ourselves in 2022, and most people have kind of barely any, if any, kind of sense for how and why humans behave the way they do. It's not a coincidence. The map of America, for example, and this applies across many Western countries, that the inner cities are liberal and democratic, and the outer suburbs and farming areas are largely Republican and lean to the right. There's a very good reason for that, and it's because of the inner city wants more, left to to an extreme becomes almost communist, and the outer side has exists in a different reality where it's actually interfacing with invaders and wants to have guns to protect its territory and is not protected by the inner city police, for example. You're left to your own. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of reasons on both sides for why both sides behave in very different ways because they're essentially living in slightly different realities. And this explains why people who live in Los Angeles, as I did, in a major metropolitan area, their values get shaped a certain way. And then you move to somewhere in Texas, for example, and your own values will change based on your change of geography because your reality will have changed to a degree, and your policies and your politics will change, and your values will change to a degree. And so I think it bears understanding that we should not demonize the people who live in a different geography, which kind of, in some sense, has some sort of predetermination. We are heavily influenced by our environments, and our environments influence our values and our politics. And we should not demonize um, our brothers and sisters, and even, I mean, family members or cousins, what have you, and et cetera, et cetera. We should really resist the urge to demonize and otherize people that live uh, in a different geographical space. That's not the. I didn't phrase that. I didn't land that point exactly right, but that's a lot of what it is. That's a lot of it, and it takes, I think, some deep soul, some forced empathy. And if that's, that maybe that should be an exercise we should all work to do to try and bridge the gaps here and bridge the division. And it goes not only geographically, it also goes racially, gender, across genders, across every sort of difference. Um, anyway, I hope we can find a social framework that enables folks to do that more conveniently and naturally. And anyway, so
The
Sure,
problem
Tyler,
is,
a little.
Tyler,
Oh, sorry,
because I
Missy.
think, I'm sorry.
there's also
I think they cut off
there's also, I
somewhere.
mean, having just heard Ben's voice, and I'm happy to turn. I want to hear Messi's point and Ben's point, but in Europe, of course, and for the Americans, they'll empathize most readily with the English version of the class structure of the political leanings as well, where but and we have that to a little bit of a degree in the U.S., and I think people are really taking that ball and running with it, with the technocracy element in the U.S. at the moment. But Messi, could you please try and remake your point succinctly, and then we'll go to bed.
Yeah, I was gonna add very quickly that I think there are a lot of people who are making a ton of money by creating actually more divisions, right?
Right,
If we look at the left and the right media,
right,
and they really are stalking that type of stuff. And the sad part of it is because the division has already happened, that the economy has happened, that we don't even bother to watch and to even open our mind to watch the other side or to listen to the other side. So
right.
because of that echo chamber, we are really listening and amplifying what we already believe in. So that's what makes it really difficult
Great
to
point.
make things better.
Yeah, be mindful if you're listening to media that is clearly trying to demonize the other side. It's not that they don't make good points. Tucker Carlson, believe it or not, from time to time makes very good points. And who's the Ben Shapiro makes regularly great points, but they have a really sinister proclivity for demonizing the other side, and that's dangerous. That is what we need to be conscious of. Not just, and I'm not. I picked two names out of thousands, and we need to be conscious when people are trying to use the divide and conquer tactic against us, and call it out and be like, you were doing fine until you just tried to, use the divide and conquer trick. I got to stop. Let's stop people, call people out a bit, and become more conscious of this tired old gag that's leading to our own sort of general demise. So, Ben, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm just going back a little bit. I was trying to get it in a more timely fashion, but I got a call when you were talking about air superiority, ground superiority, etc. Just a point on that from coming from physics. One of the most ancient advantages is to be uphill of somebody else, and one of the most ancient disadvantages, I believe, is to be downhill. There's a great recent film called The Outpost from 2020 about Americans, I believe, in Afghanistan in a valley that just really really at a disadvantage. So if you zoom out a lot and think about being uphill or downhill, let's zoom all the way out to the solar system and imagine that an alien civilization wants to splat us. They can, from the outskirts of the solar system, just nudge a few rocks into different trajectories. Those rocks come raining down on us and we're screwed. We can't do anything about it. We're downhill, very, very downhill of the outside of the solar system. So the intermediary point there, if those 2 points connect, and if it's true, is that obviously, and the US are on this, and I think most nations are on this, but it does seem that space has a disadvantage that you can't get a lot of energy up there. You can't get a lot of mass up there, should I say. You get plenty of solar energy to a laser to be cool. You can't get a lot of mass up there yet. It's so expensive. But with that disadvantage in mind, that you can't carry a huge amount of mass yet, you are very much uphill of everything else. So I do wonder for the military guys, I'm very much ex-military, how much truth there is in space superiority being the next clear frontier. I think with laser weapons and the like, and enough of it, that I do think it would be the next frontier logically. But anyway, just a thought.
So the next article in the headlines here is Meta or Facebook Messenger adds some interesting, cute little shortcuts that you'll be finding out about soon. And Google adds a booking page to Google Calendar, letting users present available periods for a meeting, which is obviously Calendly for those who use Calendly. It's become wildly popular, and it's become so popular that Google's now going to copy it and make it directly into Google Calendar, which is brilliant. And I have to say, I'm looking at it right now, and they've even done a better job than Calendly on the user interface. It looks brilliantly simple. That's fantastic. So that's expected to roll out this week. And DeepMind, the AI team out of the UK that Google bought years ago, says it made changes to its policies after a female former staff member accused the Google-owned company of mishandling sexual misconduct allegations. Former employee at DeepMind raises concerns about grievance procedures following assault and harassment by a senior researcher. And Y Combinator's Demo Day Winter 2022 batch is coming up with 414 companies in total, and the first batch to receive YC's new standard deal across the 414 companies.
Can
What?
can I can I
Yes.
add very quickly?
Yeah.
Africa for the first time made the number three with Nigeria having 18 of them. So Africa made
Oh,
it
that's
like
right.
24.
You're
So
talking about Y Combinator Demo Day. So Y Combinator, out of these 414 companies that are part of this this batch, how many was it? 19 are Nigerian?
yeah, yeah. Out of that batch, I think the biggest was the US, and I think 35 India, and then the third one is Nigeria. I think was 18, but Africa in total had 24 for the first time ever. So
Very
yeah.
cool. Yeah. The next one is Reuters says, according to sources, the DOJ, Department of Justice, is investigating whether Google bundling maps with its other software illegally stifles competition. Very similar to the old Microsoft antitrust. According to The Guardian, Ofcom claims that around 16% of UK 3 and 4-year-olds view TikTok content, rising to around 33% of children aged 5 to 7. So for 16% of 3 and 4-year-olds are viewing TikTok. And 1 in 3 aged 5 to 7. Okay, so what else? As Netflix cracks down on password sharing, a survey of 4,400 US consumers shows that 33% of subscribers share their password. Okay, and Bloomberg says they have sources that Google, the Google of Russia, known as Yandex, which operates a search engine and a ride-hailing service and more, could run out of semiconductors for servers in 12 to 18 months due to sanctions. So Russia's omnipresent tech company is kind of like the Google plus the Uber plus the Tinder plus the 10 other things. This Yandex kind of runs tech in Russia. And it looks like their servers are going to start melting in about 12 to 18 months due to sanctions. And Waymo, which is the autonomous car company of Google, plans to offer fully autonomous rides in San Francisco without a human safety driver as part of a growing test. The company is also expanding its service area in Phoenix. Okay, and those are your big boring headlines for today. Into the tweets we go. So the first tweet that I have for today, actually, let me refresh the page, Cheryl. Let's see if something new came in. No, it didn't. Okay, so the first tweet I have for today is from the New York Times, and it says how war in Ukraine roiled Facebook and Instagram. The rules over what war content is permitted on Facebook and Instagram keeps changing, causing internal confusion. That makes sense. It's a once in a hopefully lifetime situation where they're having to make up the rules on the fly, and very important rules about what are people able to say and not say, because one of the main fundamental points of content moderation is calls to violence and provocations of violence, which they really don't want to do. Well, that becomes a little tricky in a wartime scenario, and calling for the death of Putin or Russians or what have you. Yeah, of course. They're making up the rules as they go. Of course, it's going to be messy inside all of the content moderation at the moment. All the ingredients of the Russian-Ukraine conflict have been around for a long time. The calls for violence, the disinformation, the propaganda from state media, says a professor at University of California, Irvine, and a former special reporter to the UN. What I find mystifying was that they didn't have a game plan to deal with it. Yeah, well, they hadn't had to deal with a kind of a big war in Europe previously, so it was kind of not on the radar or on the plans to deal with. No one was planning for a war. One of those things we like to hope never happens has now happened. So the next is from Thomas Tong that Google is using AI to better detect searches from people in crisis. Is it a invasion of privacy? Some want to ask. Google says AI is helping it respond better to cries for help. So, meaning, should it know that you're depressed when you're searching for depression medications? Or are you looking it up on someone else's behalf? And should it keep memory of that? Is that an invasion of your privacy that it remembers that you search for depression medication, for example? In a personal crisis, many people turn to an impersonal source for support, which is Google. Every day, the company fields searches on topics like suicide, sexual assault, and domestic abuse. But Google wants to do more to direct people to the information they need and says new AI techniques that better parse the complexities of language are helping. Specifically, Google is integrating its latest machine learning models into its search engine to more accurately detect a wider range of personal crisis searches. The company unveiled at its I/O conference last year and has since used it to augment search with features that try to answer questions connected to the original search. So
To
should they?
me, the problem happens if they share that information with pharmaceuticals to sell drugs, or worse, sharing it with other parties, third parties, and other things, where it can cause a lot of problems, with the medical information. If people are trying to run later on, and then, you get blackmailed or your life gets derailed, that's the crazy part, right? When you have this big tech having your health information, and how do we trust them that they're gonna keep it and not share it with a third party?
Mm-hmm. Okay, next up is from BB from South China Morning Post that Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov is in Beijing to brief Beijing on Ukraine in first China visit since the invasion, since Putin visited Xi during the Olympics, where he asked for Uncle Xi's blessing to go ahead and attack Ukraine, which you better believe he did. He would not go do that without running it by the boss first. And Uncle G said, oh boy, do I approve of that, because you're going to get your shit kicked in, and then you're going to become my puppet, which is what has happened, which is what's happening, which is what's about to happen. So now the Russian foreign minister is back in Beijing to update the boss just how badly they fucked up. Russian foreign minister and his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, had a thorough exchange of views on the situation and hit out at counterproductive Western sanctions. Yes, so counterproductive, those sanctions. So the next one is from Thomas Tong that Apple will reportedly no longer fix iPhones that are flagged as stolen or missing. There we go, Apple. You did it.
Thank goodness.
There you go, Apple. I'm giving you the clap, Apple.
Yes, give them a horn for me.
Stop fixing stolen or missing iPhones. Love that. The next is from Thomas Tong that LinkedIn is building new analytics and video features for creators as they start to compete with YouTube. And my own little personal anecdote to share there is that I recently did an event in Stockholm, and it went very well, thank you. And I was surprised. One of the biggest surprises of the event was how popular the event was on LinkedIn compared with other social media in Sweden, where it was very, very, very popular on LinkedIn. The photos and comments and likes and shares and blah, 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 far more than on any other social media, and far more than all the others combined. So it's LinkedIn is starting to get into the media game, and I think it's because on LinkedIn, for the most part, Your identity is confirmed. Your reputation is, rather intact, and people behave in a much more civil, positive way there. And it's managed to create an environment that's a bit more, a bit less toxic and negative, etc.
It's
So
a
the
more professional network. But by the way, I thought recently there are many fake profiles.
Yeah, yesterday we read the news that they made the avatar with the auto-generated website or something like that. So
Yep.
at the same time, they can have this robberies.
So the next article is, the headline says, scientists say that dark matter, which is confounding everybody. No one has a clue what it is. But this article says that dark matter may be information itself. There's no shortage of debate about what the nature of dark matter is, a mysterious substance that many physicists believe makes up a large proportion of the universe. In spite of never having observed it directly, now a physicist from the UK named Melvin Bopson is raising a startling possibility that dark matter might be information itself. Quote, he even claims that information could be the elusive dark matter that makes up almost a third of the universe. If we assume that information is physical and has mass, and that elementary particles have a DNA information about themselves, how can we prove it? My latest paper is about putting these theories to the test so that we can be taken seriously by the scientific community. Okay. The next one is that. Oh, actually, I'll skip that one. Evan shares one. Oh, it's about Yandex and their search engine servers melting in the next 18 months. Did anybody else have an article they want to make sure that we share? Jeff G.
Dyson. Tyler left Dyson headset with the visor. Did you see that? They just announced that. I love that gadget. It's cool, but very weird as well.
Oh, Tyler, we have Monica back on stage.
Yes, Monica. I heard there's another Indian unicorn.
Unicorns.
That's not a joke. I'll pull the name up for you right now. It's called Games 24x7. Becomes India's latest
What a
unicorn.
name.
Games 24/7. There you go. Online gaming in India raises at a 2.5 billion valuation. So that raises the question: how many unicorns has India created so far this year? We will hold on to that question. So, from Jeff G. from Bloomberg, half of Russia's 20 richest billionaires are still not yet sanctioned. 1 month after the invasion, Russia is now the most sanctioned country in the world, but at this moment, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, exactly half of the top 20 oligarchs have been sanctioned, and who will be next?
Well,
So,
I have an adequate guest if someone want to listen, because I have mapped them all of them, and all the companies, and that's an horrendous amount of companies surrounding all of us, all the way up to BlackRock. They actually have parts in BlackRock. Figure that one out. Figure that one out, and don't get bone chilling goosebumps all over your body.
okay. The next one's from BB that Shanghai has gone from partial or half lockdown to full lockdown. Is that correct, BB?
Yeah,
What?
my friend who is supposed to fly out like yesterday, didn't manage to because they cancel all international flights, and because
Oh,
of yeah, so
that's
poor
just
thing.
what I say I'm worried about.
But it's so silly because of that there's a lot of logistics things that need to be done, including extending their visas and then transferring them from hotel to service apartments, etc., etc. But yeah, poor thing.
Yeah, so yeah, just like the news said, but still, I think that it's a divided, but many manufacturers were asked to stop their manufacture, so that's why it's going, yeah, worse this time.
Okay, next.
But I think it's ridiculous, Tyler. They are still going for zero COVID strategy, which is so silly.
They don't have a choice. They're going to have an
Yeah,
incredible amount of deaths like they had in Hong Kong.
no way to step down.
They need to do whatever they can to minimize the incredible amount of deaths that they're going to have in the very near future.
But for Omicron, according to Fong, only the elderly and those immunocompromised people will be high risk. The rest will usually be not so severe
Mm-hmm.
symptoms.
Right? It's going
So
to be
I
a
think they're just overreacting.
But
no.
what happened in Hong Kong actually could happen in China. That's why they are so worried right now. Because in China as well, the elderly, the coverage, the vaccine coverage is poor as well. In Hong Kong, most that died are elderly without fully vaccinated. So that could happen just like overnight in China.
Mm-hmm. So BB shared a video from Shanghai that went viral recently during the full lockdown, and it's a video of a robotic dog with a broadcasting speaker, and it's yelling something in Mandarin as it walks down a residential street. So, BB, what is the robotic dog
No,
saying?
I think I heard it. I think it's very similar to the one. Remember, we have the robot dog in Singapore park, Bishan
Right.
Park, that actually tell people to like have
Yeah,
safe
yeah.
distancing.
Let me tell you exactly what he said. He
Yeah,
said, wear mask, wash your hands, check your
yeah, it's COVID
temperature,
related.
yeah, sanitize more, gather less, and then ventilate a lot. And along with the scientific COVID control, here
Yeah,
comes the civilization. That's the
I
conclusion of
think it's
this
very
robot.
similar. Very
Perfect.
Oh,
similar.
that's interesting. So they're using a robot to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, a
That's
robot
cost
dog.
effective because in Korea they actually use the elderly to drive around and make those announcements through a blowhorn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, this is more reasonable because they don't allow people to go outside at all. So,
Okay. So the next one is from Evan that drone maker DJI rejects claims that it leaks data to Russia on Ukraine's positions. Chinese drone maker DJI is dismissed as utterly false accusations that it's leaking data to Russia. And Bill Gates backs an Arizona-based startup that makes water out of thin air. We covered that one yesterday. A voice cloning technology may have been used in a scam. The scam goes beyond a call that claims they're holding a loved one for ransom and then use the voice of the loved one to encourage the victim to pay for the scam. That's going to be a problem. Imagine hearing your loved one pleading for their lives. Wow, what a sinister way to use voice cloning technologies. The next one is from CNN. It says Putin's war has triggered an exodus out of Russia, but the escape options are shrinking, and indeed they are. The trains to Helsinki have been cut recently. Flights out of have been stopped pretty much everywhere. How to leave Russia? Google searches for this term in Russia hit a 10-year high inside the country within a week of the invasion of Ukraine. By the way, I have two Russian friends staying with me here at my place at the moment. So, and I talk with them every day. We haven't really talked too much at length about the Russian perspective on all of this, but probably will soon. So if anyone has a really good question that I should ask, send me a DM and then we'll answer the best questions. Severe drought and mandatory water cuts are pitting communities against each other in Arizona already, and it's only March or April, just around the corner. But boy, is this going to get really, really, really bad in late 2022. Let's circle back to that one in September and October and November. The drought. If you were with us last year, you'll remember how bad things were getting in 2021, and 2022 is going to be worse. It's already starting. So the next is that Trump's new right-wing social media app tanks with 93% decline. It's the headline from our friend Evan. And Germany close to gas rationing as it activates emergency fuel plan to get off of its dependency on Russian energy. And things get kind of serious there. And then there's a Poppy shares one about the Ukrainian invasion is putting tremendous pressure on the global food supply. Yeah, we kind of already knew that. So I will pause there because I think, Messi, you're 1 minute away from starting the Tech News Africa room, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm starting in a minute.
Go
Thank
for
And
it.
it's
you,
pinned on top of
Tyler.
the room.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, everybody, for contributing or listening and doing whatever you do. And hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow, Thursday.